Dun, 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 dun. Is that the intro music?
Exactly.
I didn't get around to doing that yet, but I think people are still going to listen. It's great to see you.
So good to see you. This is the Kosher Wine Podcast. Da-da-da-da-da-da.
We let too long go by without getting together, but of course, we both lead very busy lives, right? I think I do.
It is hot.
Yeah, it's hot here too. It's hot there.
Very hot. Oh my gosh, it's hot.
Really, I always all I picture in Montreal is like snow all the time.
Yeah, right. That's what everybody thinks. Whenever it gets hot, I think about my wine.
Well, I do that when it gets cold and when it gets hot.
No, but what I mean is that I think if I'm so hot and I'm schwitzing, the wine must be schwitzing, and I don't think that wine can schwitz.
No, it's not. It's worse for the wine than you, that's for sure. Where do you keep? What's your wine setup? I don't know if we ever discussed that.
So I have these two Cavavin cellars. One is 130 bottles, and the other one is like 110 bottles.
It's called Cabovin.
Cavavin, it's a Canadian brand
Okay.
of wine cellars. I'm pretty happy with it. I
Is
mean,
there is there just I'm asking for everyone. Is there electricity in Canada? I don't know what happens up there. Oh, so they're essentially they're wine fridges of sorts.
I think they're better. It's a little better than a wine
Okay.
fridge
It's like
because one of the things that I find with a lot of the lower end wine fridges, I have one of them sitting there actually. It's not even on. Is that they vibrate, which is really bad for the wine.
right, right. So this is more, I guess, in the Eurocave level of like the high end, right? I mean, this has some kind of motor in it, right? It keeps it cold.
It has a motor, it has a compressor,
Yeah.
but it's not. It's pretty stable. It's like a big,
Right,
it's a
right.
big fridge.
I hate to tell people that because it sounds like a jerk thing to say when I see people have these little wine fridges, and I'm like, those are probably worse than just putting it in your a cool closet.
Right.
I'm sure that's a controversial statement, but I think the shaking on those is shaking is such an underrated problem for wine, more than meaning, most of these wines we have, we're not, how long are we really cellaring them? Are we selling them for 25 years? There aren't even that many kosher wines that applies to. So most of these wines, fine, you're going to keep in your cellar for 3, 4, 5, 6 years or whatever. The shaking is a bigger problem than having it at a, let's say, slightly warmer temperature than ideal. The temperature ideal is what, 54, 55? Okay, so mine's at 62. That's less of a worry to me than if it were shaking nonstop in a
So,
refrigerator.
so what is a worry is when people kind of they think they're being smart and they keep on changing the temperatures in their wine fridge.
Right. Right. You
Like
don't want fluctuation. Right.
no fluctuation of any sort. So if you're at 62, keep it at 62. If you're at
Right.
55, keep it at 55.
Right. Right. So mine, I mean, it's as archaic as it gets. It's just wood wine racks. And in my basement, which is below ground, there's some fluctuation. I mean, but it's cool to, and it's dark down there, which is this is a whole separate topic that we won't get into, but the darkness is, I think, also more important than the darkness and the vibration. Everyone worries temperature, 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 but like these
I think it's
things,
dark or just
light is such a damaging thing for wine.
but sunlight or light in general.
Well, sunlight is the worst one, and if, in fact, I always, there's one store in Boca or Miami, somewhere in Miami, and they have a great wine selection. And I walk in there, and they have hundreds of wine up on the windows. And I'm like, without knowing how long they've sat there, I would never buy that because they're just sitting in a windowsill in Miami.
That's the recipe for disaster.
I don't hear people complain about it, but still, I mean, like, it doesn't make sense to me. Because I think sunlight is the biggest one, but any light really, I mean, UV light is the problem, but that's why those kind of refrigerators and whatever, they always have those kind of the blue lights and those types of lights in them. They don't have regular lights in them. That's the reason why,
Right.
because that light is damaging itself. And it's also a reason for people that haven't noticed that any wine specifically for aging, but any wines that you may put in your cellar have darker bottles. They're not in clear bottles because wouldn't it be common sense to put wine in a clear bottle? But you rarely will ever see a red wine. In fact, it's like I recently had a red wine in a clear bottle, and it's like it's striking. Like something feels wrong about it. You're so used to the browns and the greens, and
Right.
that's why it's wise to protect the wine from the light,
And humidity is important.
right? Well, it is. It is. I think the two underrated things though are the light and the vibration. I mean, meaning yeah, humidity for sure. Yeah, because we all want to have a cave in our basement or somewhere, but those are hard to come by, I think, in at least in the mid-Atlantic.
What, what I would
So
what I would say is, and that's what I was just thinking, like it's hot. You want to make sure that your wine is not in the kitchen. When I went to my brother-in-law's house and he was storing his wine above the oven, I wanted to sorry for calling you out. You don't know which I have
right.
a lot of brothers-in-law. But the
It's true. It's a feature in like fancy houses. They have these wine racks above the stove. I'm like, who's designing these kitchens? It's a night. It's like, what are you doing? How like that's literally put it anywhere else in your house, and it's better than putting it above your stove. See that
but
all the time.
but unless I would say keep it out of the kitchen.
It shouldn't even be in the kitchen, of course. Really nice, like, is to see in maybe I should go into kitchen design. Maybe we should do kitchen design, like wine-based kitchen design. How about that? They'll be like, there's no sink in the kitchen. Yes, but you have a great wine cooler. But you see those the kitchens that are designed with wine coolers also. That's nice.
Yeah.
Um, okay, well, we needed to get the people demand a podcast, the Kosher Wine Podcast. So we needed to get something out today. And I figure, since we didn't really discuss this, I figure I'm going to talk about some of the amazing wines I've had lately. Yes, and I'm sure you've had some too. I don't think we spoke even since Shavuos.
We have not spoken about our
From
Shavuos
those out there.
wine. We've spoken nothing.
Right. We did the last one we did was the picks for Shavuos.
Yeah.
Right. I can say I drank a lot of bubbly, which is no surprises to you, I'm sure.
I'm
But
shocked.
so I'm gonna show a few and talk about a few of the ones I had and a couple other interesting ones. Nothing so in depth, but just highlight some of the great wines I had recently, and I'm sure you have at least a couple that you can talk about.
Sure.
By the way, it reminds me that, and I'm teasing this upcoming podcast, but I really want to cover wine clubs. I know it's not a great topic for you because in Canada, you probably have no access to most of these clubs.
The word tease was correct because every time I hear about a wine club, I
Right.
feel like I'm being teased because I have no access to them.
There's one I'm pretty sure we'll talk about that when we cover it, and I'll tell you about it offline, but there's one I think that's new, international that I imagine you could get, but maybe you can't get that either. Maybe because Canada is so restrictive. But in any case, because one of the bottles I picked is a wine club bottle, which that is teasing to you because you probably have no access to it, which is another reason we need to meet up in California. And I'll dive right in with that one. And I wrote about this wine and I highlighted it. It's Covenant Landsman Syrah 2022 from Santa Rita Hills. And they even have the sub vineyard thing, the Robert Ray Vineyard. I know this is a wine that the Morgans are very proud of. Jonathan Haydu is very proud of. Did I talk about this when we were talking with him? I may have actually. So I'm not, you know what? I'm not going to dive into it. But it was so good. And that's the wine club we'll talk about.
I actually just had the Landsman Zinfandel, the Lodi Zinfandel from 2014. I just had it yesterday. Still vibrant.
I think not only that, I think now's when you want to drink those. I found especially there's so few Zinfandels kosher on the market that it's so nice to have that one. But I always find that right out of the gate, and that may be the case with most of the Landsman wines, right out of the gate are not ideal. You want to give it a couple years, but the Zinfandel, I think, starts peaking at the beginning of 5 years. And I think that like 5 to 8 year period, and I totally agree with that because I've been opening 2013 Zinfandels, like Landsman Zinfandels that are really great now. And to be totally honest, I didn't really like them back when I got them years ago, which is why I still had them. I didn't back then. I was like, I don't even know what I was thinking. I was a young man in the just getting, I was already into wine for a long time, but I didn't love it right out of the gate. And I'm like, and I had so much of it. And I'm so happy that I put those aside because they're really great now. So I think that 2014's in. It's like, get
It's
on that.
was just perfect. And I'm really happy because when I bought it, I bought 2 cases and I just was like looking at my cellar. I don't, there's one cellar I look at and one cellar I just kind of like let it sit. And I was like, I have like a case left of it.
That's amazing. There's so many people because we read all the wine snob stuff and whatever, and like people are like, oh, I found this case of I'm like, finding cases. Like, what
I
is that?
know. No, but I didn't find it. I just have I have wines that I have in my cellar. I have wines that I'm always coming and going. And then I have one that I don't look at
Right,
because
right,
storing it. And that these
right.
were look, they're 2014s, right? They've been there for a little while.
That's great. But you can get that in Canada?
I can get it through private import. Yeah.
Okay.
So
So
I have to what I have to do is I have to call Jeff and Jody and I have to make an order and then it has to go through the regie. It's like a whole process, but I could do it. It's called a private import.
I thought private import meant you were like smuggling it under your beard or something like that.
Yeah, right. Here.
Wonder that beard keeps getting longer. All right. I pulled out 3 bubbly bottles that I loved, and there's something unique about each of them. Number one, they're each from different regions, different parts of the world, even, and very different and different price points, in fact. So I'm going to start with the least expensive one that I always stock up on, and I think it provides one of the greatest values, and it's more crowd pleasing than a lot of like traditional champagne style because, well, I'll show the bottle first. It's the Koenig Cremant d'Alsace, which Cremant is more crowd pleasing because it's not going to be as dry and yeasty as the method champagne. It's a little fruitier, it's livelier, it's easier to drink on that level, and I love it. I mean, again, I really love most bubbly. At some point, it gets a little too sweet for me, but this is certainly not that. I think it's such great value. I happen to get a great deal. I think Kosher Wine had this on sale, and I bought 2 cases of it. So it's like I think I got it for like $18 or something like that. And
Wow.
it's so good. And at that price, you never feel bad about popping it like you would about some, $60 champagne. But
Yeah.
I'm going through them too fast. So I need another sale to come up soon.
Hint, hint.
And you're familiar with this, right?
I wonder if David listens to us. David, if you're listening to this, shout out to David Riven, our good friend, kosherwine.com.
To
If you're
both
listening
of
to this,
us. Yes.
we wanna know that you're listening.
Yes. I haven't asked him if he listens.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't want the answer. Maybe he's going to tell me. And he's a busy guy, so but he does drive a lot, so I think that's a
Yeah.
good. No, I'm gonna have to. Yes, I hope he is, and that is a hint to him that he should put that back on sale, if only just for us.
He's actually a good
Um,
friend of mine from Montreal. He grew up in Montreal.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Um, so an interesting thing about this is that it's a brute, which I think a lot of people get confused about what these words mean when they see bubbly wines. Brute, you see extra brute, brute nature, brute, extra dry. So first of all, what's the difference between extra dry and extra brute? Most people like brute means dry. So why
That
is
must be super dry.
it? And we mean it this time. Really, really super dry. And then you have, of course, the sweeter ones, sec, demi-sec, and the dew. But what is the difference between extra brute and extra dry? Extra brute is the really dry one. Extra dry is actually the least dry of the dry ones. It's dry, but it's not actually extra dry. So it's kind of like a misnomer of sorts. Extra brute means that it's 0 to 6 grams of sugar that are left over. Extra dry can allow 12 to 17. So in fact, borderline, I mean, to me, borderline sweet. But I think to some people it wouldn't be borderline sweet, but there is some sweetness there. So this Koenig is brute. So that's, anywhere, I think it means under 12 grams, but it could be as much as 12 grams of sugar left over per liter. So that's a fair amount of sweetness in there that it can be. It's a bigger category, but it means that it's going to be at least not totally dry. Now, when you see the brute nature, that means they don't add that dosage to at the end, adding that sugar syrup at the end to add that. A separate thing it means, by the way, or that you should know about that, when you see the super, or see, now I'm using those terms, but when you see the brute nature, those are not champagnes that you want to age because they need that sugar to be able to age. So those are ones you really want to drink when they're young.
They'll be much more alcoholic.
Yeah.
You age
Well,
them.
I mean, but the bottom line I'm saying is that a lot of these, and another one I would, well, not so much. I was going to make a point to the next, it was going to lead me into my segue, but this is actually the opposite. But this is a famous champagne, is the Bonnet-Ponson.
Oh,
But it
wow.
happens to be, and it's
Extra dry.
It's extra brute.
Oh, extra brute.
Which means it's totally dry, which is why I love it. I got this from the cellar in Lakewood. And in fact, Ben Weber, the great Ben Weber, and I hope he listens. I think he listens, but I speak to him a fair amount. He even told me, he said, drink it. Because I got 6 of them from him, and he said, drink them all now. And I hate to do that kind of, but that's why. I mean, that's because he knows his stuff. And I think they're the exclusive importers, but Bonnet-Ponson is a famous champagne, and it's worth every penny to me. And the point I made when I wrote about it is that I think it retails for $60. That's not cheap. I'm not a rich guy. $60 is a lot of money, but this is true champagne. And an interesting thing of why I would call this actual QPR, which is the quality price ratio, which means, are you getting the quality for what you're spending? The non-kosher version of this, I mean, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but the non-kosher version of this sells for the same price, I'm pretty sure, which is very, very rare in our world.
I actually just looked it up. It's true.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
So to me, if the non-kosher, it doesn't make it QPR, but great champagne for $60 is already somewhat of a bargain. That's hard to say for Premier Cru Bonnet-Ponson, which is a very famous champagne. But that fact makes me feel really good about how I'm spending my money. The fact that it's the same price as the non-kosher.
Wow.
Right. I mean, wouldn't you think so? Where does that ever happen anywhere in our world?
There is. There is. I would say, I think that's also a myth. Years ago, there was a huge price difference between kosher runs and non-kosher runs. And kudos to the people who are doing some of those runs, because I think they've done a much better job recently keeping the prices at bay, at par.
I can't say I agree with that. I don't see it. I would love examples of that. I mean, there are some, and there's also the wineries that have kept their prices fair at least, and haven't gone into these crazy. I mean, I think about some bottles that I know what I used to pay for them, and I know what I pay for them now, and I get it. Everything is more expensive and more expensive, and I know I'm making a separate point than what we're even talking about, because we're just talking about the price of wine versus what it used to be in the kosher world. But the most famous examples in the ones where you have kosher runs of non-kosher wines, it's unbearable to know what the non-kosher one sells for. I don't know which ones you're talking about. I would love to see examples of.
I'm thinking of the higher end wines.
I mean, like Chateau Pontet-Canet is a good example.
That's exactly what I was thinking of.
But it makes my point, unless I'm wrong, that I believe that sells non-kosher. I'm going to look it up right now. But the kosher one retails anywhere from $300 to $400.
And that's what it is in the kosher.
Is it really? Are you sure about that?
Yes.
I'm looking right now. No, I don't think so. I think 125, like that.
Well,
I'm pretty sure.
Pontet-Canet is 125
prices. I don't know what they do up there, but Pontet-Canet, I'm looking 126, 100. It's like 3 times the price.
Really?
I think so, and I think that's true.
I see here 241, 242.
Are you looking in Canada? That may be very different. It may be very different in Canada. Maybe. I don't know, but it may be. I'm telling you, in America, it sells non-kosher at like and again, I'm not here to complain about that stuff, because kind of is what it is, and I've somewhat made my peace with it. I don't buy those wines. I don't buy $350 wines. I just don't, because I can't. It's not a matter of that I want to or I'm against it. I want to remain married is part of the reason.
So we had a we had a wine tasting here this week, and Jay, our good friend Jay,
I
came in.
saw that. Yeah, Jay was there. That's great. Tell me about that.
It was amazing. We did. I'm getting to the Pontet-Canet in a second, but we did Israel versus the world, and whenever we do these kinds of tastings, if you've never done one, and I'm not speaking to you, Kenny, I'm speaking to the rest of the rest of the listeners. If you've never done one, it's fascinating to take two wines that are similar types of wines from two different regions and really taste them together, like pair them against each other. And so that's what we did. And so actually one of the wines we tasted was the Pontet-Canet. And I asked Jay, I said, why does a winery that you and I both know they do not have any problem selling their wine, why do they care about having a kosher run? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And he looks at me and he's like, it's a good question. I have no idea.
I'll give you the two answers. The one that I used to more so believe, and the answer that most wineries will say, and then what I believe is more likely the truth. The first, I'll tell the first one first, is that they like to make their wines accessible to everyone. That's what the winemakers will say. That's what the wineries will say. They want you to be able to drink their great wine too. I don't believe that's the case anymore.
I
believe
don't believe that was ever the case.
they make money. It's money. Granted, they're selling it out anyway, so there is a reason why only some of them do it and not others. Meaning, because then if it was all just about money, then every famous winery would do it. But that's not the case. But there's money to be made for everyone in between also. So it's unfortunately a money thing. I mean, that's a big part of it. But I hope to at least believe that there's some, altruistic, right? I mean, that they want it to be, I don't know.
You met
I'd
some
like
of
to
the
think
French
that, but
winemakers?
every time I write that or something, like I'll write, I'm talking to the winemaker and he said, we want to be, kosher because we want to be available for that market too, and blah, blah, blah. And then like three people will text me angrily. That's just false. I know that's not the truth and whatever. So
Have you met some of these winemakers? They could care less. That's what I'm
I know.
shocked about.
Well, Jay's a nice guy and Jay probably didn't want to give that answer. He knows the truth.
Well, that's why we have to have this podcast, because we can say the truth. And it's a mate. Look, there's no question. Is it worth the amount of money? I don't know. But I hadn't had a Pontet-Canet in a little while, and tasting it, it's just wow. But I will tell you about the other wine that we paired against it. Like, what do you pair from Israel against the Pontet-Canet? That
That's a
was
good question. I mean, I guess the Castel Grand Vin maybe would be the first thing that would pop out of my head because that's kind of what he goes for. What did you choose?
So it was a bottle. Jay was like, where did you get this from? We can't even get this in the States. It was the Odem Mountain 1060 single vineyard cab, but the Alfasi special edition.
I know exactly the bottle, but yeah, that doesn't come here, I don't think.
It doesn't, he said that they don't send it to the States. You have to get it from the winery directly.
Which is how you got it, I imagine.
Yes.
Under your beard.
Under my beard. I have to say, it stood up.
Really?
It was a fantastic pair. If you like that kind of, the Pontet-Canet has that unique flavor. And if you want to pair an Israeli wine with that unique type of flavor, like it's like this, like the density, the black currant, a little bit of I'm trying to describe it, but it's that mix of the Cab and the Petit Verdot and the which those Bordeaux style wines Israel can do, but that Alfasi Odem Mountain 1060 Alfasi, that's something special.
What vintages do you remember offhand?
It was 2018.
That was a 2018. A great vintage in Israel, by the way.
Great vintage in Israel.
it was almost can't miss vintage every 2018. And the Pontet-Canet
Was the 21.
it was a 21,
Yes,
which is much maligned in the wine nerd world.
that's
It
right.
was bad vintage in Bordeaux, and I think a lot of people who are willing to spend that money for the Pontet-Canet are not buying that one, the 21. I
Yeah.
tasted it. I did taste it. And it's like one of these things. It's great wine. I get it though. It's not the previous 19 and 20. The 21 it suffers that same problem that a lot of the 21 Bordeaux. It's a thinner type of wine.
It's thinner, no question. But come on. I mean,
I'd be
I don't
happy to
know.
drink it. Yeah,
I
I'm
would be,
happy to
I
drink
was elated. It was, oh, I'm
it.
sorry. Robert Parker didn't give it a 98, which you and I know about. He gave it a 96 instead. Oi.
Right. But I wouldn't invest in it. I wouldn't invest in it. Meaning, not invest in it from an actual financial perspective. Meaning, it probably won't age as well, and like that type of thing. And if you're dropping that kind of money, which again I do not, that's not the bottle I'd buy.
Right.
So, but I'm happy. Anyone that wants to pour it for me, I'm happy to drink it. So that's an interesting matchup. What else? What other ones did you guys do?
I want to hear more about your wine. Okay, we can
Okay,
talk.
well, one thing I wanted to mention, and the reason I pulled that Alsace, that Koenig across the board, I love those wines, and it's Alsace. When I was taking W set, it really it's worthwhile looking up. I did write it up at some point, but it really gives you an understanding of why geography is important to wine. It's such a unique geography how Alsace sits right like on the side of a mountain and of a mountain range, and why that the what's happening on the west side of it with the westerly winds, why it doesn't affect, and the rainfall. It's very cool geographically what happens there, besides being, and I've never been there, which I would have to correct in my life, it's one of the most beautiful like wine regions you can visit. But from a geographical perspective or topographical perspective, such a cool thing, and why it affects the wine in the way it does, which I'm not going to get into because that could be a whole podcast, and we should discuss that at some point, geography. And so I don't think people understand that, and why winemakers are always talking about these things, because it really, really matters in the final product. And that's why Alsace is such a special region for wine. So that Koenig and Koenig, interestingly, for such like a cool region, those wines are very economically friendly. They're all inexpensive, just
A
like the
lot
one
of
I
a lot of the
highlighted.
Alsace wines are.
It's an interesting thing, right? I mean, I'm happy to grab anything I can from Alsace.
Yeah, I had an Alsace Riesling last night. It was great.
Ah, yeah. It was at
Great.
the Koenig Alsace Riesling?
No, it was the Alsace.
Alsace, I don't know which one you're talking about.
There's a
Just called Alsace?
yeah, it's called Alsace.
Okay. The third bubbly is an Israeli bubbly. Now, this
Oh,
I see how bad my camera is when I pull this up.
I
By the
don't.
way,
You just pulled the bottle out and knew it was Matar already.
yes, that's
You have
right.
to even have
The
to.
biggest problem with these style bottles, and they're really cool in shape, and no, those who can't see it and are only listening, it's a very wide bottomed bottle, and it's kind of shaped like the Eiffel Tower, I guess, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a very cool bottle, but it's a nightmare for a wine rack or wine fridge. You can't fit these into anything. But the Matar Blanc de Noirs, I believe I can check, but it's 100% Pinot Noir, and it's it's absolutely a method champagne, and the fact that they use Pinot Noir in it is delicious, bubbly. It's not cheap. I think it runs 70 to $80. But it is a champagne style, or I'm just going to call it a champagne. It's not, of course. Champagne is from France. We all know that here, but it's something that can be aged and improved. Really, it was really delicious though, and it's very dry and yeasty and everything that champagne lovers love. So
Yeah,
I very much enjoyed that one also.
we're ever so thankful to Pelter for making kosher wine. I know it
Seriously,
sounds crazy, but I mean, their
seriously,
wines are unbelievable. Their Petit Verdot is one of my favorite wines.
I agree. It's a great winery. There's a couple other wineries, and I don't know who to talk to that I really Seahorse. We mentioned that before. Margalit. These are famous Israeli wineries that I wish they would put out, I think Marguerite maybe even made one like kosher run or something, but not, I'm talking regularly. I want their wines. I want their wines.
Seahorse, yeah.
They just had, and a friend of mine who I talk to a lot of times, Yechiel Wogel, who's like really a young rising star in the Israeli wine industry. He's working at a Gur right now, but I talk to him very regularly because I love seeing all the things he's doing, because he's doing something I've never done. He's actually making wine. He's working in a winery. And so he sends me all these cool little things, but he just went, and I know, like, Adam Montefiore were there, everyone was there, but they had a Riesling tasting, an Israeli Riesling tasting last week. In addition, something we should note also to that, they did the big awards in not Israel, not in Israeli wines, but of
European, right?
all the international, the biggest, the was it Decanter wine Decanter, I think is their awards. I can look in 1 second, but very notably, Israel had their highest rated wine ever. I'm gonna look it up right now. You can talk for a second.
Yeah, so I can talk about some more of those wines that we
Pulling it
put
up.
up while you're looking.
It's the Decanter World Wine Awards, and I'm gonna see if the list is here. Go ahead. You talk for a second. I want to look this up because I want to highlight it.
This is the first time we are fact checking live on this podcast.
Well, I mean, we try to come with most of our facts are right already, right? I mean, we
So
don't need to.
this is the big debate, and if you're listening to us right now, Kenny and I have a huge debate on this. So Kenny,
Go ahead.
the podcast needs to be pre-planned. Like we have to have a plan, a beginning, a middle, and end with the planet. And we've done a couple of these, and some of you may like that. I like this free-flowingness of it. I like, let's not, today we didn't plan anything. He wanted to do something else. No, good. I said, let's just get on and talk. We both love wine. We could talk about wine all day. Let's just talk like you're listening to a conversation of two people who know about wine. Like,
I happen to think we're doing a pretty good job for that. I'm always like, it's going to be a disaster, and like, but this is pretty good. It's pretty good. It's pretty darn good. So it's the Decanter World Wine Awards, which just happened last week, and here it is. It received a platinum medal, which again I don't believe has ever happened. The Ramat Negev, a wine that most people don't even talk about that much. The Negev is really a cool place, and it's very cool for the future of winemaking, what's happening there. But Ramat Negev is not a winery that a lot of people in the United States talk about that often. This is the Ramat Negev Exodus Grand Reserve 2018. Interesting, it was a 2018, by the way.
2018. If
It
you
won.
ever get those 2018s,
That's right.
grab them now. Not
It,
only was that an amazing year, it's an amazing year to drink right now.
that's right. Very much so. It received the platinum medal and 97 points.
Wow.
Decanter World Wine Awards it's one of the largest wine judging shows. Very prestigious, and it's held in London every year. Decanter magazine organizes it, and it's a real, I think, mark of honor for Israel. They had four other wines that won gold medal and 95 points. May as well say them. Is 1848 Generation 2 Syrah 2021, the Psagot Single Vineyard Cab 2020, Tepperberg Legacy Petit Syrah 2018. I love that wine, by the way, that specific wine. That's a great wine. And the Yarden Cab 2018, which was really fantastic. I prefer the Merlot from the 2018, but that Yarden Cab 2018 was, to me, a real return to some of their glory years. But those are the ones I won, and I think it's something that we should all be proud of. But the Israeli wine industry has a lot to be proud of.
I'm not surprised that the 18s are doing well now.
Right?
Like, not surprised that this is what's going on. What I was surprised when I saw it is how many Israeli wineries did win awards. Why I was surprised is because I always thought in the back of my mind that some of these awards were a little political. And I think that
there's no question. There's no question.
I thought right now they have every reason not to choose a winery, and they did. So
right
to Decanter.
I mean, I imagine most of these are blind tastings, but still somehow, Which brings me to another point, by the way, and I discussed this on my own channels last week, but it's painful to see what's happening in the north of Israel on every level right now. Of course, there's thousands of people evacuated from their homes. But this is a wine podcast, so we'll talk about wine and good friends of ours at Dalton, who we've highlighted a bunch of times. Alex Haruni sent a video from their vineyard in Miskavam. The entire vineyard, which produces their Pinot Gris, burned down. Burned down, gone. This is a vineyard that they've invested a lot of time, blood, sweat, and tears in, and it's so painful that it just burned out of hatred. Just that Hezbollah is lobbing rocket after rocket after rocket into Israel that the world ignores for some reason, and of course these wineries are exceedingly difficult to operate right now because, like I said, people aren't even up there. The country has evacuated the north for the most part. It's really terrible, but that's on a daily basis now you see how terrible it is for these wineries and these winemakers to just do the simple act of making a bottle of wine, which brings happiness and joy and shalom into the world. And that's what we're fighting against.
I think that is exactly what we're fighting against at every level. The idea of loving life and bringing happiness and joy into the world. So wine is definitely the essence of that.
Right.
But that's what we're fighting with. We're fighting with love of life versus love of other things.
It's so clearly to us that this is really a good versus evil. It's people that love life versus a cult of death. Yeah. And it's hard to imagine why so many other people in the world don't see it that way, and why we always feel like, are we living in an alternate universe? What are people seeing? Don't they see what we're seeing? My only answer to that ever is that that's what God wants, because it's Gullus, and that's where we are right now. And in fact, it gives me a stronger belief because it's so illogical. It's right. So hard to understand.
It really is.
Right? How does the UN, what are you looking at? Why are you not seeing the same thing we're seeing? How do people that say that they're, for progressive politics and whatever, how are you on the side of radical people who'd slaughter you in a second? How does that make any sense? Like, it's so backwards. But that's what we're facing, and that's we've never had it easy, certainly, even though I've had it pretty easy in my life, because I've lived thank God I've lived in an era where it's been peaceful for American Jews. There's no question. You see what's always simmering right under the surface, and any student of history, and I'd like to think I am, that nothing stays that way. It's like we've thought this before. So unfortunately, we're in exile and we're in Gullus, and that's I know that. But I am thankful for what I have here, and I'm proud to be an American, and I'm a proud American Jew, and I still understand that. But I know it's home. I know, and that's like, thank God we have that. But I think we need to double down on our efforts to buy Israeli wine and to support our brothers and sisters in Israel.
And we pray for the Israeli winemakers in the north, to Dalton and all the others who are having so much difficulty right now.
So one thing we can do is support them financially, and that's now more than ever. Now more than ever.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I've done my part in my own little way. Like, really.
Yes. I hate to leave this on a kind of despondent note, but it should be at the forefront of everyone's mind all the time.
Yeah.
What our brothers and sisters are facing on a daily basis. It's very easy to get used to it because October 7th was 8.5 months ago, but there are still Jews in tunnels and murderous hands, and that has to be at the forefront of our mind every day, even when we're drinking wine and enjoying ourselves, even then. So,
and the north is not. People talk a lot about Gaza. They talk a lot
right.
about what's going on there, but there's a huge, and it's really flaring up actually right now. It's terrible what's been happening over the past few weeks. And so we really have to pray and think about our brothers and sisters in the north, and continue to do whatever we can for them in every way.
Correct. And Hashem should bring our hostages home safely and speedily,
Amen.
protect all of our soldiers and all of our family.
Amen. Penny, it's so nice to spend this time with you just to talk.
That's what we do too.
If you like this style better than the organized style, let us know, because I'm a big fan of this style.
Well, we do both. We do both. I just it came down to like, I'm not ready. Let's do it next week. But yeah, we need to do it. And this was great. It really is always great to schmooze with you. And it's just, it's like you first proposed to me that it'll be just two friends talking. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's really great.
Well,
And
thanks
next week we can do your thing about the wine clubs.
Of course, I'll wait till the last second and not really prepare. But we both know enough to pull this off.
If you have a wine club that you like, let us know.
Yes. Have a great Shabbos. Great to spend the time with you.
Same here.